Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Day 9 Daily number 357, where we're taking a look at IdrA versus Puma. Now we're going to step into the mid-game and see not just how good these players are, but how mistakes can occur and make me go, And again, the three reasons I did this, they are very standard for very long periods of time, and this is very unusual. The second reason why we're going through this game is there are periods where they both plummet back down low in food, and the question is, how do we rebuild from there? And the third, and I think the most important thing, is that despite the fact that this game was epic as fuck, there were still big erroneous errors. There were errors. There were errors. That's the appropriate way to say it. And it looks like IdrA is just going to be doing some usual harassment. Rhett says something that I agree with quite a bit, is that you don't really want super fast mutas in a lot of circumstances. In many cases, you just want, eventually, a lot of mutilants. Excuse me, eventually a lot of air control. Puma, gearing up to take himself this third base. Again, not going barracks and then reactor, because it's hard to get more barracks with reactors. Just going barracks, barracks, and he'll reactor, reactor, later. Alligator. Now, usual mid-game things that we're going to see IdrA do. He's spreading creep. He's getting himself a handy-dandy, fantastic amount of Zerglings, but not Banelings. Zerglings, but not Banelings. You build the Banelings when the attack is coming. Why is that? You want as much money as possible being devoted to things like expanding and building more drones. Every time you invest in a Baneling, that's 25 minerals and 25 gas that you spent now for an attack that might be coming up later, but might not. So what you want to do is wait as long as possible for that and keep as much money going for these long-term things as you physically possibly can. Great upgrades by IdrA. And we see our little Pumanator continue to just poke and prod with these little tiny things, the Cloaked Banshees. He's doing a drop here to put a little bit of pressure on while he can continue to defend. And I thought this was kind of a cute play. Cloaked Banshee, Medevac. I don't actually know if this Cloaked Banshee ever comes back into the game. But this Cloaked Banshee did some cool stuff, picking off this watchtower. Come to the IdrA cam with me. Has a little bit less vision in the center of the map, thanks to that guy, so that's great. This here drop in unison with this here drop. Again, we're going for the big late macro play, hence why we have our two engineering bays getting ready to rock and roll. Just for the record, if our friend Puma was being really aggressive on two bases, he should not be building a second engineering bay. He should be staying one engineering bay and getting an armory, and not getting the second until he takes his third. Again, upgrades, make sure they are consistent with your overall idea. IdrA, who's on 4 bases, getting double upgrades, makes a shit ton of sense, you guys. And of course, doing the usual droppage, we see these spine crawlers going down, because the more spread out you become, the more important static defense at your back doors become. And this was a fantastic decision by Puma to apply a little bit of squeezing here. We'll take out a total of 15 drones, and now IdrA is going to go back to his usual funky monkey business. He has up to 75 drones. Same story down in Camp Puma, getting himself more engineering bays. And again, I like this choice of building these barracks like this. Not just because we're a little bit low on gas, but because when we really need to start ramping up the marine production later on the road, we can just add 5 reactors. Because we were spending all this gas on things like building the factory, building the starport, building the armory. Those investments are now done. What am I going to do with that extra gas? Well, it's freed up to build me some reactors. Now, one thing that I think is pretty clear for IdrA is that his goal, his clear goal, is to get the Greater Spire up, do the pushing with that there pathogen glands, and all's well. What about for Puma? We're going to see him have a simple goal of just pushing up here. Pushing to this nice little location, trying to shut down this 4th. We end up seeing Puma do a little macro hatchery here, but I want to begin speeding through this mid-game region. Going right on through. Does he actually just straight build? You fucking nutcase. You psycho. That's so bold. But let's take a moment to look at Puma's overall map look. He just knows that there's a base here, and knows that there's no base here. Because remember that drop that swung in there? So he's just going to quite simply just push right along up here. In a moment, we're going to see Puma throw up a ton of defenses. Look at this. Building bunkers galore. Holding this watchtower to make certain that he has a good sense of where this army is. When the army is on this side, it's safe to reinforce. As the army moves up towards the center, it is not safe to reinforce. This is why I started to like this game a lot. Remember what I said? They're both playing standard, and sometimes it's very hard to know what standard games look like that go on this long. Well, here, we're getting a chance to really see that. A little bit of a miscontrol with the Banelings, but of course, IdrA just ends up cleaning up without too much necessary over-control. But what makes this push so good, and sort of a consistency thing, is that if we come back to the 5-minute mark, quite simply, there was a drop that went on that whole time. Big pushes like this, if you are in big macro mode, doing a huge push with, where did that one medevac go? There he is. While this push was going on, again, look at the center of the map. See this little reinforcement? See this little reinforcement blob right here? Well, that's fine because Puma has control of this watchtower. That's why he's able to reinforce. Kind of a little bit example of what we were talking about before. Here comes the drop. And if we can't reinforce our main army, given this positioning, this is actually just really brilliant and very subtle. If the army is on the left side, we can reinforce and then our main push becomes bigger. If this army is on this side, cutting off our reinforcement and pushing here, because the army's on this side, it makes the drop that's all the way over to the left stronger. Simple manipulation of positioning. Really, really, really good stuff. And of course, when the medevac was down here, it was protected by virtue of this whole big push that was up there. So despite the fact that, again, look at the mini-map, you see all that getting crushed off, you see all that? Ugh. Demolished. But hey, no big deal. Continue to do damage to this hatchery. This just got me so excited. IdrA rebuilding himself a lot of Mutalisks, up to 32. I think too many. You can be kind of screwed if you overbuild Mutas like this. And it's happened to IdrA many times before. But hey, Puma, wait a minute. Whoa, when did this attack happen? Well, we were distracting him up there. Again, the reinforcement path. This is our simple, clear, basic little goal. And as we move up here, hey, look at this drop being nice and strong and good. I kind of would prefer, once we get over here, to have a drop going on at the top side. And it doesn't... Oh, yeah, there it is. There's the drop going on as well. And this kind of makes it just look like, oh, he's pushing and dropping like crazy. Think a little bit harder than that. Right now we have 2 medevac drops going on. In that last circumstance, when we took this down, we had 1 medevac drop going on. I want to have a little bit of awareness regarding that. So the drop here actually just goes straight into the main, which IdrA really doesn't want. And you'll note that IdrA is just being resilient right now. He's just holding down like a hero. I think he should be favoring almost exclusively Zerglings right now, and he should not be building these Mutalisks. One, because, I mean, I'm not going to lie. 36 Mutalisks? I've never had 36 Mutalisks and thought to myself, man, I really need 45 Mutalisks. If only I had 9 more Mutalisks, I'd be good. I've had 8 Mutalisks and thought, man, if only I had like 16 or 20 of these, then I could actually manage to do this shit. But like, come on, right? There comes a point where a lot of people will say, well, what is the right number of Mutalisks? Well, you can't even answer that yourself. You can just be like, well, that just seems stupid to have that many more Mutalisks. Don't think about the number of having them. Think about how adding them on feels. Think of how adding on 10 Mutalisks feels right now. It doesn't feel like it accomplishes very much more. You can still kill a medevac with a couple Marines in it. Puma has good macro. Look at that. This is some good macro. Oh, look at him spending all his gas. Still haven't really built those reactor barracks. We've been spending all our gas on upgrades, but now that my gas is freeing up, F yeah, let's build some frickin' reactors and really start holding down that A button. Look at me, I'm Terran. And now IdrA starts being able to finally get a little bit of breath. Not because Puma ran out of steam, but because Puma accomplished a shit ton with those attacks, and now IdrA doesn't really have anything left to protect. He's just lost a lot of stuff. But IdrA, I think, is having the clear goal of getting up this Greater Spire stuff. And IdrA's actually in good shape. He's actually in really not so bad condition, because he was so stable despite all that craziness that was going on. And these counter pushes are being so violent. In fact, if you actually come and look at the workers kill tab, we see 44 workers killed by Puma, but IdrA has a substantial amount of workers killed just from a couple of huge shoves. Now, this push that's coming on the right seems obviously blurred. I'm just going to kill this expansion. And when there was an expansion here, I wanted to come pull all the way over there. But again, note that this push coincides with us taking this right expansion. If there were no base here, I still think that this is the correct angle to attack at. And to then come over to this watchtower and then slip down here, because it helps cover this back expansion. And of course, IdrA doing a lot of damage, doing good stuff. Oh no, EG's Puma needs to move out. But because, again, if we do our little logical process, why is this still a good position for Puma? Because, my god, he went ahead and did a drop. Now that's just in theory it's good that he did a drop, as we see IdrA actually just kills off the drop. And right now still no one has a lead. So now all of a sudden we're in this kind of funky position where your average bear, I would even say your average high master and low grandmaster, does not end up in a situation with this much evenness. If you are gold to platinum to diamond level and you have an opening build and he has an opening build, you're going to be about even when you're at like 8 minutes, because both of you don't have really that much to mess up because you're so comfortable doing your standard stuff. But in this circumstance, with these players being so good, it's still pretty damn even. But of course, IdrA keeping up his consistent goal of getting up Broodlords and Infestors. Part of the reason why I also think that that many Mutalisks is a little bit overdoing it. I mean, we could have begun putting pressure on some of these bases a little bit sooner. Vikings, Medevacs, looking good. This push happening on the opposite side of the Medevacs. Good stuff. Always sort of conflicting things. Conflicting pressures, peeling Zerg in opposite locations. Again, not going for any huge vital blows, just like a little bit on the left, a little bit on the top. Keeping it nice and spread out. So at this point in the game, now that we're at 25 minutes, I want to pose a question to you. What is the #1 goal for us, no matter what player we are in this game? I'm even asking the chat, lay it on me. What is the #1 goal for both of these players in the most general basic sense? And it's so funny because you can overthink the shit out of this. You can be like, well, my goal as Terran is to maybe eventually transition to battlecruisers if he has too many air. What's my ultimate goal? Well, I mean, I need to try to get a really high Broodlord count. I need to go Broodlord Infestor and push. Yeah, I've seen it come up, and oh, the Arctic Fox, even using my exact words. Yes, that's right. Managing expansions. Some people say get expos, some people say kill off his expos. That's all great. It's all expansions. Period. You are not trying to get a death ball. You're not trying to get the perfect mix. I don't care that Broodlord Infestor is a really, really good composition. It is meaningless unless you have expansions up. It is meaningless unless you are doing a freaking incredible job of managing expansions. So this counter push by IdrA is brilliant. Why is this brilliant? Because we were just here not long ago. We saw that he was low on minerals. Hell, we don't even have to have vision here. We can look at our own natural and say, damn, we're mined out. And our main, damn, we're mined out. And at our third, well, we're not looking too great. I mean, our Terran player has to be at the very least even or worse than that. So I better just start killing off his expansions soon. And even if I lose this, I still have this up. This is why IdrA's defense of these locations, right as he was getting this Broodlord Infestor up, makes so much sense. If I can secure one or the other, I'll still have the 8 gas geysers that I need to be able to sustain my main army. I just need to be defensive. Were there any Zergling counterattacks going on? No, absolutely not. Great job by IdrA here taking this one out. And I think that IdrA is slowly sort of stepping into the lead. He's going to do something that, of course, will make everyone ruffle and ruffle and ruffle. We have the spine crawlers here to help delay. Really cool. I think that if we're building the spine crawlers here, then these Mutalisks, after they kill this off, should have cut by this watchtower and then down south. Why is that? Because then all of a sudden, if our spine crawlers get attacked and we're down south here, we can pull back up and defend from the backside. Moving this far to the right makes our Mutalisks really vulnerable and makes this really vulnerable. And again, all the stuff I'm saying about all this basic unit movement around the map is what standard is when you're at the 25-minute mark. Standard early on is saying something like, oh yeah, having 3 barracks with 2 reactors and a tech lab, a reactored starport and a factory, these buildings, this is standard right here, man. But in the late game, it's all about moving and expanding and thinking about where you're going to be expanding based upon your troop movement. Now this was really bad. Not a big deal. They're still absolutely dead even in terms of this unit's lost tab. It's not too big, but it's still something to think about. IdrA is building up his nice death force. But his goal, again, is not to do a death force kind of push. It's to manage expansions. So if I'm here right now, I do not like having these spine crawlers here. I want to think about how to protect my own expansions. That's exactly what IdrA does. Good. If I'm Zerg, I want to... Do I have Overlord Speed? Let's find out. Nope. I actually think Overlord Speed is one of the most essential Hive Tech upgrades. When you start getting Broodlord and Fester, you just cannot cover space well. You can drill space well. You can crack faces with this kind of composition, but you can't actually defend the map very well at all if he's doing drops all over the place. Part of the reason why people end up getting spine crawlers. But why not just get Overlord Speed? You can easily get Overlord Speed and shove stuff here and then have a good sense of where his expansions are. And does IdrA have Burrow? Nope, doesn't have Burrow. Another error, I think. Like, very clearly an error and can only be described that way. And we do see IdrA doing a brilliant job replenishing the drones in just the right amount. A very tough skill to be able to achieve properly. But I mean, part of me just wants to wonder, right now, why does IdrA not look at this expansion? I mean, let me back up 10 seconds before this floating guy is out of sight. I have absolutely no idea why we're not keeping intense vision here. Because what if there was a building command center and a bunch of turrets and half an army there? Or what if there was just a naked expansion? We'd kill it off again. This expansion, all the information that you need in the game will come directly from here. If he is spending everything to defend it, then we can consider doing a counterattack down here. This is the worst place you could possibly expand right now. Far and away the worst. The ground lip is controlled by the Terran player. The Terran player moves here to this watchtower, and boom, you suddenly can't reinforce, and he can move up to the high ground. This is essentially only defendable by air. This is a better expansion choice, and this is actually, I think, an extremely important expansion choice. Like, really, really, absolutely, essentially, critically important. And up to this very point in the game, I think both players would be hard-pressed to do very much else different. Very hard-pressed to do much else different. They've both been playing really well. Sure, you've heard me lay on some criticisms of the players, but, you know, we're talking about the difference between being at 95 versus 100%, right? Let me not be so arrogant. Maybe the difference between, like, 85 and 90%. Did you hear me just describe my knowledge with 100%? Oh, be a better gamer. I know everything. Look, I don't. But, like, there are things that I think there are ways to improve upon it. Man, that was awesome. Yeah, so, but for the most part, these players are just playing extremely well. Extremely well, so it's hard to think of a way that either of these players could have played differently. And here's the big engagement that's about to happen, where after which the game's a little bit crazy. So we're going to take a break. And we'll be back afterwards. So what we saw a lot in part 1 was good establishment of everything, quite typical. And then in part 2, we saw how both players were being super ultra resilient. IdrA continuing to take multiple expansions and defending them by spreading out his units properly. Puma trying to peel the defenses apart by hitting at all these different places at once. And most importantly, managing expansions. Most importantly, there was a lot of expansion management that goes on. We're going to see that come up in the late game coming up in part 3. And especially in part 3, we want to see some gigantic blunders that might not seem that bad, but would have helped close the game out faster. Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Coming up with part 3 in a minute. Woohoo!